She cheated on the vacation I paid for, then texted, "I met someone. I'm staying here." I replied, "Follow your heart." Then I called the airline and canceled her return flight and cut off her access to my credit card. Her next text was frantic, asking how she was supposed to get home. I, 32M, should have seen the signs. My wife had been distant for months, claiming work stress was consuming her life. She'd started working late, going out with colleagues more often, and our conversations had become nothing more than logistics about bills and schedules. When I suggested we take a vacation to Bali to reconnect, she seemed hesitant at first, but eventually agreed. I spent weeks planning everything. The resort overlooking the ocean, the couple's massage packages, the private dinner on the beach. I maxed out my credit card and dipped into our emergency fund because I thought saving our marriage was worth any price. She seemed excited during the flight, talking about how we needed this time together. The first 3 days were perfect. We laughed like we used to, held hands walking through the rice terraces, and I started believing we were finding our way back to each other. She was taking lots of photos, posting them on social media with captions about paradise and new beginnings. I felt hopeful for the first time in months. On the fourth morning, she said she wanted to explore the local art scene alone. She'd always been independent, so I didn't think much of it. I spent the day by the pool, reading and relaxing, expecting her to return by dinner. When evening came and she still wasn't back, I started getting worried. My calls went straight to voicemail. She finally returned to the room at midnight, claiming she'd lost track of time at a gallery opening and her phone had died. Something felt off about her story. She was flushed, her hair was different, and she avoided eye contact. When I tried to kiss her goodnight, she turned her head and mumbled something about being tired. The next day, she disappeared again after breakfast. This time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I walked around the resort, checking the spa, the restaurants, anywhere she might be. That's when I saw her at the beach bar with a man I didn't recognize. They were sitting close, laughing intimately, and his hand was resting on her thigh. My stomach dropped. I watched from behind a palm tree as she leaned in and kissed him. Not a friendly peck, but the kind of passionate kiss she hadn't given me in years. They looked like lovers who'd been together for months, not strangers who'd just met. The way she touched his face, the way he whispered in her ear, it was clear this wasn't their first encounter. I went back to the room and sat on the bed, staring at the wall. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, but another part needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. I started thinking about all those late nights at work, all those colleague dinners. How long had this been going on? She returned that evening acting normal, chatting about the beautiful sunset and asking about my day. I played along, watching her lie to my face with practiced ease. When she went to shower, I checked her phone. She'd been careless with the passcode, our anniversary date that apparently meant nothing to her anymore. The messages were all there. Weeks of conversations with him, planning this trip, talking about how she couldn't wait to see him again. Photos they'd taken together today. Plans for tomorrow. And worst of all, messages about how she was going to tell me she wanted to end our marriage but didn't know how. I spent the night lying awake next to her, planning my next move. She'd already betrayed me in the worst possible way, using money I'd scraped together to fund her affair. But I wasn't going to make this easy for her. The next morning, she left early again, claiming she wanted to catch the sunrise. I knew she was meeting him. I waited until I was sure she was gone, then I got to work. I called my bank and had her access to our joint credit card suspended. I contacted the airline and canceled her return flight, which was flexible enough to allow changes. I also called our hotel and had her removed from the room registration. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from her. My hands were shaking as I read it. "I met someone here. I think I'm going to stay a few extra days to see where this goes. Don't wait up." I stared at the message for a long time. She was actually doing it. She was choosing him over our marriage, over the life we'd built together. But she was trying to do it on my dime, keeping me hanging while she explored her options. I typed back, "Follow your heart." 2 hours later, another message. "Actually, I think I need more time to figure things out. I'm going to extend the trip for a week." I didn't respond. I packed my things, checked out of the hotel, and headed to the airport for my original flight home. I turned off my phone during the journey, needing the silence to process everything that had happened. When I finally turned my phone back on at home, I had 17 missed calls and a dozen frantic text messages. The tone had completely changed. She was asking why her card wasn't working, why the hotel said she needed to pay for her extended stay herself, and why the airline said her return flight had been canceled. Her most recent message read, "How am I supposed to get home? Why aren't you answering? Something's wrong with my card, and I don't have enough cash for a hotel." I sat in our empty house, surrounded by wedding photos and shared memories, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. I typed back, "You said you met someone and wanted to stay. I assumed your new friend would take care of the details." My phone immediately started ringing. I let it go to voicemail. In her message, her voice was panicked and desperate. She explained that it wasn't serious with this guy, that she'd made a mistake, that she just needed space to think. She begged me to reinstate her card access and help her get home. I called her back. When she answered, her relief was palpable. She started talking rapidly, trying to explain herself, but I cut her off. I told her I knew about the weeks of planning, the messages, the photos. I knew this wasn't a spontaneous decision or a moment of weakness. This was a calculated betrayal. Her silence stretched for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Finally, she asked how I found out. I told her it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she'd made her choice to prioritize someone else over our marriage, and now she needed to live with the consequences of that choice. She started crying, saying she'd made a huge mistake, that she wanted to come home and fix things. But I could hear the hollowness in her words. She wasn't sorry about the betrayal. She was sorry about being caught and stranded. I told her I'd transfer enough money to her personal account for a basic hotel room for 3 nights and an economy flight home, but that was it. She could figure out the rest with her new boyfriend. If he really cared about her, he'd help her through this situation she'd created. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house and started making plans. I called a divorce lawyer first thing Monday morning. I gathered all the evidence from her phone, printed out the messages and photos. I opened my own bank account and started separating our finances. She tried calling dozens more times over the next 2 days, but I didn't answer. I did transfer the money I promised, enough for her to get home safely, but nothing more. I wasn't cruel enough to leave her completely stranded in a foreign country, but I also wasn't going to fund her extended romantic getaway. Update 1. She made it home after 4 days. I wasn't there when she arrived. I'd moved my essential belongings to my brother's place. She left voicemails begging me to talk, saying she'd ended things with the other guy and wanted to work on our marriage. But I'd already filed for divorce. The divorce proceedings were straightforward since I had all the evidence I needed. She tried to claim half of everything, including the money I'd spent on the vacation where she cheated. My lawyer made it clear that her adultery, especially the calculated nature of it, would not work in her favor. During mediation, she finally broke down and admitted the affair had been going on for 3 months. She said she'd felt trapped in our marriage but didn't know how to end it, so she thought the vacation might help her figure things out. When she met up with him there, she realized she wanted out, but was scared to face the financial consequences of divorce. I looked at her across that conference table and felt nothing but pity. She'd destroyed our marriage because she was too cowardly to have an honest conversation about her feelings. Instead, she'd chosen to lie, cheat, and try to manipulate the situation to her advantage. The final divorce settlement gave her far less than she would have received if she'd just been honest from the beginning. I kept the house, most of our savings, and she was responsible for half of the vacation debt since she'd benefited from it too, even if not in the way I'd intended. Update 2. 6 months later, I ran into a mutual friend who told me the rest of the story. Apparently, her vacation boyfriend had dumped her the day after I cut off her card access. He'd been expecting a fun fling with someone else's wife, not to become responsible for her travel expenses and emotional drama. She'd spent those 4 days alone in Bali, trying to figure out how to get home with limited money. She'd had to stay in a cheap hostel and take multiple connecting flights on budget airlines. By the time she made it back, she was exhausted, broke, and completely alone. The mutual friend said she'd been struggling since the divorce. She was living in a small apartment and working 2 jobs to make ends meet. She'd apparently tried dating, but couldn't maintain any serious relationships. The friend suggested I might want to reach out, that she seemed genuinely remorseful. I thanked the friend for the update, but made it clear I had no intention of reconnecting. I'd moved on with my life. I was dating someone new, someone honest and straightforward who communicated openly about her feelings. I'd learned valuable lessons about recognizing red flags and not ignoring my instincts. Sometimes I think about that moment when I read her text saying she'd met someone and wanted to stay. The old me might have panicked, might have tried to fight for her, might have begged her to reconsider. But something in me had shifted. I realized that someone who could betray me so callously wasn't someone worth fighting for. Update 3. A year after the divorce was finalized, she reached out directly. She sent a long email explaining that she'd been going to therapy and realized how badly she'd handled everything. She said she understood why I'd done what I did in Bali, and she didn't blame me for protecting myself. She asked if we could meet for coffee to talk through everything properly. I read the email twice, then deleted it without responding. I'd already processed our relationship and moved on. Her need for closure or forgiveness wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd given her safe passage home and a fair divorce settlement despite her betrayal. I didn't know her anything beyond that. My new girlfriend asked if I was curious about what she wanted to say. I realized I genuinely wasn't. The woman I'd married and loved had made her choice that day in Bali. Everything that happened afterward was just the natural consequence of that decision. I never regretted canceling her flight or cutting off her card access. She'd wanted to follow her heart, and I'd simply removed the safety net that would have allowed her to do it without consequences. Sometimes following your heart means taking responsibility for where it leads you. The house feels different now, lighter somehow. I've redecorated, removing the traces of our shared life and making it truly mine. Friends say I seem happier, more confident. I suppose learning that you can survive betrayal and come out stronger changes how you see yourself. I still travel, but now I go places I want to see, with people who genuinely want to be there with me. Last month, I took a trip to Japan with my girlfriend. We split all the expenses equally, planned the itinerary together, and never once did I worry about where she was or who she might be texting. That's what trust feels like when it's real. Not the blind faith I'd had in my marriage, ignoring obvious signs because I wanted to believe everything was fine. But genuine trust built on consistent actions, open communication, and mutual respect. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is let them face the full consequences of their choices. My ex-wife learned that lesson the hard way, stranded in paradise with no one to blame but herself. And I learned that my instincts about people are worth trusting, and that sometimes the kindest response to follow your heart is simply stepping out of the way.